Hi, I'm Dan Barker, co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Today on Facebook Live, we're doing another FFRF Ask an Atheist free-for-all. Annie Laurie Gaylor, who's also co-president, is here today in the Stephen Ewell Friendly Atheist Studio in Madison, Wisconsin. And so is Andrew Seidel, FFRF's Director of Strategic Response. And maybe he'll tell us what that actually means. In a few minutes, we're going to respond to some of the Ask an Atheist questions that Andrew was asked at the farmers market on the state capitol square. But if you have a question for us anytime during today's show, you can ask it right here in the Facebook comments, or you can send an email to askanatheist@ffrf.org. But before we do any of that, we want to kick off the show with FFRF's first Atheist Town Hall. So, Annie Laurie, maybe you can set up what we're going to see here.
Yes, at the last convention that we had in September, we held the first secular town hall, and this was emceed by Cara Santa Maria, who is an award-winning science reporter, a blogger. She has a podcast called Talk Nerdy with Santa Maria.
Talk Nerdy
with Cara Santa Maria. And we assembled, I think it was about 16 or 18 diverse freethinkers who were attending our convention of different ages and backgrounds. We had a physician, we had a midwife, a professor, a lot of students, and they were asked questions about what they think about. And it was the first ever atheist or secular town hall, and it's only about 6 or 7 minutes. It's really fun to watch, so we're going to play that now.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the first ever Freedom from Religion Foundation Secular Town Hall. My name's Cara Santa Maria, and I'll be moderating along with this incredible group of individuals from all over the country. We're going to hear what these secular Americans are passionate about. Let's begin. I want to start by asking you guys a question. How many of you identify as an atheist? Almost all of you. Ingrid, you were born with no religion. What was that experience like?
I think it's like every baby born on the planet. I'm a midwife and I catch babies for a living, and I think every single one I catch is an atheist. I am loud and proud as an atheist now, but have only been able to feel safe in that for the last 10 years or so. That's because the country has changed. And now I feel as free as those babies.
Stephen, why are you proud to be an atheist?
I think that the group that we see here at FFRF is an amazing collection of artists and poets and scientists and writers and some of the greatest minds of the world. And to just be involved with those discussions is enlightening.
You're an African American atheist, which means that in some respects you're a minority within a minority. What do you say to your cultural group who questions your lack of religion?
I was definitely raised with a very religious upbringing, and there is definitely some tension with my family, especially my grandparents when I came out as atheist, and there was some, I think, just lack of information about the entire community. And I told them that, you know, with the stereotypes that go along with it, who would we be if we were to give in same stereotypes? And so it's kind of hard for people to put me into a box, which I think shouldn't happen in the first place.
What are some of the worst stereotypes that you've heard about atheists?
They're just immoral people. They often confuse us with Satanists, which we're definitely not. If we don't believe in God, we certainly don't believe in his enemy.
The secular demographic is the fastest growing in America, yet the religious right controls all 3 branches of government, and there are no open atheists serving in Congress. Why do you think it's so hard for an atheist to get elected in this country?
There's tons of polling showing we're the least trusted minority in the country. So it's just currently political suicide for you to be open about your non-religious views if you want to get into politics. But I think that's changing as the demographics are changing.
Then do you think that there are politicians who are actually atheists but haven't said that out loud who are serving right now?
Yeah, I think that's almost certainly the case. If you look at the trends that are associated with atheism. One of them is just being a more highly educated person. So it's just statistically inevitable that some of the people who are currently in elected office, some of them are certainly atheists, but they're just too afraid to be honest about it because they want to get reelected.
Would we be a more peaceful society if there were no religion?
Well, I certainly believe that's true. If our decisions were made based on logic, reason, facts, science, instead of the irrationality of a lot of religious practices, I think things would go much more smoothly. I think that's unrealistic. Unfortunately, people are brainwashed into religious doctrine at such an early time in life from the very beginning that getting the majority of people back out of that mindset is very difficult.
Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos has said she wants to convert public schools in America to God's kingdom. And of course, the Trump administration has pledged $20 billion to spread taxpayer-funded voucher schools across the country. How does this make you feel?
As a parent of kids in the public school system, it concerns me on so many levels. One of them being that, is she going to try and put God into the public schooling that my secular kids have to go to? Or is she going to take money from my secular kids' school and put it into funding religious schools for other kids? Either way, it's not a good option and something that I'm definitely against.
What would you do if you found out that a teacher was telling your kids, your grandkids, that the earth is only 6,000 years old and dinosaurs walked alongside humans?
I would certainly file a complaint with the Freedom from Religion Foundation to have some resources to have this not happen to other children and in other classrooms.
We all know the earth is 7,000 years old.
Do you think more and more people are moving away from religion because the technology in their pockets allows them to just easily debunk things like creationism?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's part of it. I think a major reason that people have historically needed religion is to answer questions that they could not possibly know. So I think that technology is replacing a lot of these like mysterious questions. You can just ask Google anything. And then also we just live in a world where we were able to create Google. Like we're just more intelligent in general. God isn't as necessary anymore.
Mike, do you think that God is being replaced by technology?
I think that the technology is just helping that to happen, helping people to be able to get more information than they could before. It's, the internet is the modern printing press that people didn't know it was possible to be an atheist, didn't know that groups like this existed, didn't have access to science information, science shows. And I think that the internet is helping more and more people come to that conclusion than they probably did before.
Why do you think millennials have stopped going to church?
Well, I think that a lot of millennials on social issues, for example, LGBTQ rights, they are very supportive of full equality and marriage equality. Religion has historically showed a lot of hate towards those groups that millennials see as love.
Cassidy, how do you get your morals as an atheist?
That's such a funny question because I don't think I ever got my morals from religion. Even when I was like a religious kid, like you have your parents telling you like, don't hit, like be nice, share. And then you go to church and it's like a man should not spill his seed on the floor instead of in his wife. And it's like, so it's just confusing to me when people ask where I get my morals from because it was not church.
Do you think that a belief in creationism and in the afterlife makes people think that they don't really need to protect the planet?
If you believe that really our time on Earth is just a small little blip compared to our time with God, and that God created the universe perfectly, then we have no real obligation to protect the planet because we're going to go to some paradise, and the Earth is how God wants it anyway, climate change and all, which, like, to me is the logic of a psychopath.
Can you share a little bit about your story and your fight to remove the Ten Commandments?
Sure. There was a large Ten Commandments monument in front of my daughter's public high school. It had been there for over 60 years. I noticed that she would be having to walk under that shadow every single day. So we brought the lawsuit while she was in middle school. The Freedom from Religion Foundation and I started the lawsuit in 2012, and it took all of 5 years to eventually have the 2,000-pound monument removed.
I want to thank the Freedom from Religion Foundation for organizing this secular town hall. The Freedom from Religion Foundation is the oldest free thought organization in America. They've been fighting for the separation of church and state for 40 years. You can learn more by reading their newspaper, Free Thought Today, listening to their podcast, Free Thought Radio, and of course their new YouTube series, Ask an Atheist. I urge you to go to www.ffrf.org to learn more about their groundbreaking legal work to promote the First Amendment. I'm Cara Santa Maria. I host the Talk Nerdy podcast and co-host the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. I want to thank all of you for participating in this secular town hall.
Well, that was fun. A room full of atheists, and she got to ask them tons of questions. And Andrew, you didn't do it inside of a room. You actually went outside at the state capitol, and you didn't know if they were atheists or not. It was an Ask an Atheist booth that you had set up. So we have some of those. What are we going to see here?
Well, it was a little bit kind of like a carnival atmosphere. You know, I was out at the farmers market, which I think is the largest in the country, telling people that they could come ask an atheist any question they wanted. You know, there are these sort of big misconceptions out there that people have about atheists, and we thought we would see if people would ask us any question that was on their mind about us, no matter how offensive. I said, just bring it on. And we filmed some of them.
Well, let's bring it on then.
I would like to understand why Americans have so much difficulty equating ethics and morality with atheism. It's as if you're not religious, you cannot be ethical or moral. And that to me is manifestly nonsense.
So yeah, we get to ask that all the time because there's this assumption that if it's religious, it's good. Religion is goodness and morality, and if you don't have any moral anchor or moral compass, you can't be a good person. So how do either of you respond to that?
Well, first, I was delighted to see that question. I hadn't seen that before, and somebody from the UK, where there are even more seculars than in this country. And it must be very frustrating to come to this country and be confronted with the religious bigotry that you can't be a good person without a God. And this is the biggest bugaboo that the secular movement freethinkers face. And we think that not only can you be good without God, you can be better without God because it's top-down authority. It's not based on consequences. It's based on master-slave relationship. You have to do this or you'll go to hell, or if you please me, you'll go to heaven. And that's kind of a bankrupt philosophy.
It is. I mean, if you believe that there is a God telling you to do something, you're going to obey that God no matter what the consequences. This is why the suicide bombing community is entirely religious, as Hitchens used to point out. And to me, it's if you have a hard time discerning right from wrong, it's not that you lack religion, it's that you lack either empathy or reason. That's the problem there for me.
So you both use the word consequences instead of commandments. So how do you know if the consequences are moral or good or not?
Well, but by their by what happens, the consequence to human beings, to our planet. I don't just like to talk about humanism. I mean, look at the climate change situation that we're all confronting, where we don't care about the future for the planet, and it's going to do us in. So you look at the consequences of your actions, and are they good or are they bad? Not based on whether they're good or bad on the Bible, but on what they really do for humanity.
So what does good or bad actually mean?
Your mom had a handy shorthand for this, didn't she?
Basing your actions on reason and kindness.
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up nicely.
And Dan, you're the one who likes to debate what's good.
You're
asking that question.
I was asked that question at a debate at a huge megachurch in Charlotte, North Carolina, a couple of weeks ago. How you atheists can't decide what good is. And my answer basically is the kind of utilitarian or negative utilitarian answer that's simply harm. If something causes unnecessary harm, we call that bad. So the endeavor of eliminating or minimizing real harm in the real world. That's what we call good. You don't need a list of rules. As you say, we look at the consequences. Oh, does this cause more harm than this? And it's a simple rule that you can use to guide your moral lives.
And also, I think that the real harm of religion is it tends to place dogma above people and humanity. Absolutely. And as Steven Weinberg famously said, the Nobel laureate physicist, good people will do good things and bad people will do bad things, but for good people to do bad things, that takes religion.
Yeah, I think that's the best summation of the argument
and
there.
then just looking at people's lives, atheists are just as good, no worse off. There's some bad atheists, but there's a lot of bad Christians too. So we should judge people not by their beliefs, but by their actions.
And so I think we've got some more questions.
What's wrong with just pretending to believe in God and Christianity and just following the Bible and living as a Christian, even if you don't believe, because that way you'll get to go to heaven.
So what's wrong with pretending to believe in Christianity so that you can get to heaven? I mean, right off the bat, I think if there is a God and he knows that you're pretending to believe in him, I don't know why that
you're not going to end up in heaven.
I don't know why that. But also, be true to yourself. I mean, you shouldn't pretend to be something that you're not, and especially shouldn't live your entire life pretending to be something that you're not. And I have to wonder who somebody would really be pretending for. You know, I find it hard to believe that they would be pretending for themselves for this kind of eternal reward. I kind of get the sense that they might be pretending to make things easier, either on other people in their family or just generally on...
To get along.
Exactly. And to me, that's nothing is worth sacrificing yourself and who you are as a person just to get along.
And also he said, why not go along with Christianity in the Bible? And that opens up a whole cesspool about what's wrong with Christianity, the history of Christianity, and what's wrong with the Bible. And it's significant.
The Bible has a couple of good little teachings in it, but nothing special. The Golden Rule had been said before, and it had been said better by Confucius. But
I mean, this is basically Pascal's wager, isn't
Yes.
it, Dan? You must have done this 100 times.
Yeah, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to avoid harm, and you should go ahead and believe, because what if you're wrong? You might suffer eternal judgment and eternal hell, which basically boils down to an argument from intimidation. Is all it is. It's a force argument. You better believe otherwise. It's like Daddy saying, "You do what I say, or you're going to get spanked," right? And I think the God of the Old Testament is like that. I don't think the God of the Old Testament cares if you're pretending or not. All he wants is obedience.
Okay.
If you don't have to love me, you just have to obey me, and then you get what you want.
Okay, but I would say that when your father stands over you with that strap, and that's something the Bible suggests, corporal punishment, there really is a strap. There really is a dad.
Yep.
But there really isn't a God. And as you have often pointed out in your debates, then what's to keep this God from not saying, well, you believed in the wrong God. I'm Allah, and you're going to go to hell anyway.
Well,
there's a capricious God like that.
Yeah, and that's the problem with Pascal's wager, I think, is why you have to apply it to every religion out there, and that means you have to believe in these mutually exclusive systems, and it's not possible to even complete Pascal's wager.
Because the Muslim hell is worse than the Christian hell. And what if you die someday and realize you picked the wrong God? Shouldn't you pick, with that kind of thinking, you should find the religion that has the worst hell in it, and then that's the religion you should believe, because that's where you have the most to lose from all of that.
That is what that logic would dictate.
Any system of thought like that has to make its point by threatening violence is morally bankrupt. We should be basing our morality on the consequences and the harm and the goodness to human beings.
So I guess we're ready for another question.
Yeah, let's go.
My question is, why is the Bible and so many fairy tales so full of powerless women?
Yeah, well,
Good question. And nice to get that question from a woman. And of course the Bible, only about 10% of the Bible has women in it. And most of them are nameless. And I have written a whole book about Bible sexism. Woe to the women, the Bible tells me so. The Bible is really a handbook for women's subjugation. It's patriarchal.
How many books of the Bible were written by women?
Well, I mean, we don't know who wrote any of them, really.
But they're not named by anyone.
There's, the couple are named for women, and Esther is a kind of violent handmaid for, and then Ruth is a doormat. But so this Bible is teaching a master-slave relationship where there's God first, and then Jesus, and then man, and then woman. And so, and I can't really speak for fairy tales, it's a patriarchal world, but I did want to say that we have something that we can say hallelujah about today regarding women in religion, and that is that the 17-year-old who was in captivity by our government, by our Department of Justice, the immigrant who was pregnant, who got to our country when she was about 11 weeks pregnant and has been denied an abortion all these weeks, finally this morning, thanks to the ACLU, got her abortion at 15 weeks. And this is the harm of the Trump administration, the theocracy of dunces, where he has filled the Justice Department and Health and Human Services with fanatics, Christian fanatics, who really do believe in the Handmaid's Tale. And they treated, this is like what happens in some of these Catholic nations, like Guatemala, where abortion is illegal. And it had to go all the way up to the Court of Appeals in D.C.
Yeah, the full panel.
And it was 6-3, not even a unanimous decision. And one of the women on that panel said, gee, we don't want all of these pregnant immigrants coming to this country to have an abortion. Well, first of all, that wasn't her reason. A lot of them get raped on the way over in these horrible, arduous treks. But of course, abortion's legal. We should welcome anyone who wants to come to this country to get a legal abortion. And this is exactly what happens in England, where abortion is illegal in the Republic of Ireland. And women go over from Ireland all the time to the UK, to England, to have abortions. Imagine if they treated the Irish women like our government is saying it would treat anybody coming to our country. And this was a horrible indictment. It's frightening that this could have happened. We should all be up in arms over this, and it should never happen again. And undoubtedly it's happened already because of all of the children coming over, the minors, and getting into the clutches of our immigration there in Texas.
And what's weird about this, I think, is that this does show the harm of religion over women and women's choices. But the Bible doesn't actually say anything at all about abortion itself. The Bible never once discusses the problem of an unwanted pregnancy. Women were property, as you know in your book. You wrote, women were property. Women were ranked with the slaves and the cattle and the other property that you had. And so really it was a patriarchal mindset that no woman should be able to control her own life.
Well, and we did a whole Ask an Atheist about what the Bible says about abortion, which is zero, although it is profoundly misogynist.
And you'd be hard-pressed to find a book that it finds human life as cheap as the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So, well, thank you for that question. And then I think we've got another one.
How did the few control the masses without religion?
How did the few control the masses without religion?
Well, I think that's a cynical question. I think he's trying to say that religion has been used by those in power to control the masses. And Napoleon even said what a useful tool religion was to control the masses. So I assume
Edward Gibbon has a great quote in The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. He says that the people, of all the religions, the people thought them equally true, the philosophers equally false, and the magistrate equally useful. And yeah, I mean, religion has been a tool.
The usefulness of religion in keeping people enslaved, for example. Mm-hmm. We saw that in our country.
And glad of their chains?
Well, I don't know that the African-Americans were at all glad of their, but that holy book, which sanctioned slavery, was used to keep slaves docile, promising them pie in the sky, and it was used by the slave masters and the churches to completely justify that horrible system that we're still, seeing the need for reparations for.
And that question, of course, assumes that we should want to control the masses, right, from a top-down kind of thing. In our country, where we have we the people, a bottom-up, it's not it's not the leader who controls the masses. It's really the masses who run our country.
In theory, Dan.
Yeah.
I don't think in practice at the moment.
Well, yeah.
But I think that he was being
yeah, I know he was. But,
giving a devil's advocate question. It was a very interesting question.
There have been ways to control masses. If you want to do that, not that you should, but you can do it without religion. Look at some of these other tyrannical regimes that just did it with force and with violence. Look at how the Nazis invaded and occupied and used the force.
Well, they had Gott mit uns, God with us, on their buckle of their Bible belt, so there was a religious crusade. But if you can add into the mix the religion, you can get hold of people's psyche through religion and subjugate them. You're so much more powerful.
But I don't think the French felt that the Germans, having God on their side, allowed them to be controlled. I think they were being just forcibly occupied there.
I think maybe another way of saying it is there are several tactics you can use to control people. Fear is a very good tactic for controlling people. Division, dividing people, divide and conquer is another very good tactic. And religion is good at bringing a bunch of those together.
Right.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe it's a system that is particularly good at utilizing all these different forms of control.
Well, as Gloria Steinem once said when I interviewed her, I don't know where else she said it, but we quote it at our website. She said, "What other system of thought reaches beyond the grave to try to control you?"
Yeah.
Maybe the questioner meant Catholic masses. And in that case, how do you control a Catholic mass without religion? No?
Possible.
I think there's another question.
How do you talk about being an atheist with your family or some family members who may not be atheists, who may be religious?
So how do you talk about religion with your family members? I like to keep two things in my head when I'm talking with people who I know are friendly. I like to remind myself that people who are believers are not stupid. I think there's often a tendency, especially this tends to happen more online, I think, with atheists, where the conversation can degenerate very quickly into, well, you're just stupid for believing that. And I think that's very, very counterproductive.
Right.
And the other thing I think is good to keep in mind is that these are just bad ideas that these people believe. You know, they can change their mind like that, and like Dan did, and all of a sudden, you know, they're no longer a believer. And you didn't gain 20 points overnight, 20 IQ points overnight when you became a non-believer, did you? You just changed your mind.
30 or 40.
30 or 40, okay.
Yeah, it took a while, but yeah, you're right. I think there are some stupid believers. I mean, obviously.
Yes.
Well, there's probably some stupid atheists. I don't know any, but I'm sure there must be.
And it's still good to remind yourself that it doesn't help in the conversation to think of them in that way, though.
Yeah, because nobody wants to be ridiculed and put down. No one wants to be baby talked down to. You're so such stupid. You want to be respected. If you're going to have any dialogue at all with somebody, it should be a horizontal, respectful dialogue. And if they shut the door on you, well, then that's their problem. But we can keep it open. And in my family's case, I told my mom and dad, and I sent a one-page letter to everybody. And we talked and we dialogued. And for a while, my dad started writing letters to try to argue me out of my atheism. But it backfired, and then eventually my mom became an atheist after Sunday school teacher for years. And then my dad, about a year later, they both said, yeah, Danny's right. So we talked, we kept it open, and we like each other. I was lucky that in my family we had a genuine, even with our differences, we had a genuine respect for each other. And you have to have that, or you're not going to have a real good dialogue.
Well, you do have some religious relatives that certainly have not deconverted, among them one of your brothers. Yeah. But they didn't really want to have that dialogue.
No.
So if they're not open to the dialogue, there's just not much point.
But I think he knows that it's open. I think he knows I'm not belittling him. I'm not bad-mouthing him. Like you said, Andrew, you can talk about the bad ideas without saying the people are bad. And I think we would say that about any religion. You know, Islam is a horrible religion based on an irrational book, but most Muslims are good people. Most of them are really just decent human beings. So.
Well, as you've often said, usually religionists are much better than their religion, at least when we're no longer in the Dark Ages. They've evolved past their religion. So I guess there's no one answer how you can talk with family. It depends on your family.
Yeah, I remember one of the first questions I was asked was, so you don't believe in anything? No, I believe in lots of things, friendship and love and good food, all kinds of things. I just don't believe there's a God, and there's not enough evidence to suggest that. I mean, so I think there are a lot of misconceptions that people have out there, and by being, willing to talk about it and open like you were, you really can have a big impact on your family's outlook. Not even if they don't deconvert, just breaking down those stereotypes about atheists.
And I think this person was asking, how do you do it? And in my case, and I think you're also recommending that we not be pushy, preachy about it. We're not trying to, like your mom used to say, we're not going into churches and dragging people out of the pews and telling them how dumb they are. We're allowing that freedom, and we're saying, hey, the door's open. If you want to talk, that's fine with me. At least, I would say to this questioner, at least let them know that you don't agree. At least do the minimal without having to be so, because sometimes you can protest too much. You can feel like everybody's got to think like me, or you can show your own insecurities. But
yeah, and maybe one good way to think about that too is, people don't change their minds like that. It's how long a process was it for you?
About 4 years, 5 years.
Yeah. So, and you should be comfortable just addressing their question or sowing a little seed of doubt and letting it grow, and not worrying about changing somebody's mind overnight.
Yeah.
Well, I think, is there one more question?
Yeah.
I'm wondering if for those atheists who became atheists later in life and who were brought up in a religion, if there are ever times of self-questioning, doubt, and maybe even fear about what might come after death.
Well, Dan, I think that's your question.
Yeah, and fear is a good word, because the Bible's full of it. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, the beginning of knowledge. And it really is a fear-based religion. And look at most fundamentalist types. And there's a lot of liberal believers who don't have that mindset, but most fundamentalist evangelical types, they really are afraid of judgment, afraid of hell, afraid of disapproval of the dictator. And fear is an emotion. And if you raise your whole life, like this woman is asking, your whole life with this kind of ingrained fear in your mind, you don't just snap out of that overnight. It can take, with me, it took about a year to rebuild and to get rid of those knee-jerk kind of things that happen in your brain. And maybe with some people it takes longer, or maybe some do it more quickly. It's similar to what happens when there's any huge change in your life, like maybe a divorce or a death in the family or something. It takes you about a year for your brain to get used to that. And so I guess I would suggest to this woman that it'll get better. You might have these sort of residual fears and emotions, but it does get better as you get past it all.
Well, I remember, Dan, when you gave the first talk to the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which was 1985, I think. We called you a little baby atheist.
It was 84.
84.
It was in Milwaukee.
You'd really been
I was 2 years old.
out of the closet for a year or something. And somebody, you gave your talk, and you still sounded a tiny bit nostalgic, I think.
Yeah.
You just were so immersed in fundamentalism.
Yeah.
And somebody asked you from the audience, well, gee, do you think you're going to go back? And you responded, well, when you turn on the light, are you going to turn it off again? So pretty hard to do that.
You remember what I said 33 years ago?
I do. Made an impression. And so you were very, very immersed in the fundamentalism, but the emotions are not going to get in the way of your reasoning.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked with several atheists who, like you, they're confident in the conclusion of their atheism, but they are still not afraid of hell, but they still have those feelings that you were talking about. One of them used to tell me that he would wake up from nightmares still. And this is 15 years after being indoctrinated as a young kid. You have those visions and those descriptions of hell that can be really gruesome, and it still scare them out of their sleep occasionally, but didn't believe in it at all. Yeah.
I think, to talk about hell. But Dan, you also talked about when you were going through this process, I know you've written about it in some of your books, but that you felt at first that giving up religion would kind of be like spitting on your mother.
Yeah.
There was this idea of the blasphemous or so disloyal to your whole family. So how did you think your way out of that?
Yeah, it was like spitting on grandma. It was like, and I think anybody who's raised in a religious, cultural, maybe even ethnic identity or whatever, when you leave that, it's almost like you're betraying your whole heritage, your whole background. And going to church with my grandparents and singing hymns with them. And now that I'm leaving that, it felt like, it felt like a real betrayal. And I had to try to explain to them, I still love you and I care about you. And I remember my grandma once wrote me a letter saying, I saw you on TV. I think she saw one of those Donahue shows. I saw you on TV, but that wasn't our Danny on the TV. That was not our Danny on the show. And actually she was kind of right, because you are abandoning a lot of these values that they think are real. And that's hard psychologically to do. We're tribal animals, we're social animals, we're family animals. And when you change that, your brain, everything just is, it's like you're off balance for a while.
So was that Marie?
Yeah, Grandma Marie. Yeah.
So, and you also tell that story about how they struggled their whole lives and worked very hard and sacrificed to give money to
Billy Graham.
Yeah, it's very sad.
Yeah.
Who didn't need it.
They were middle class to lower middle class, doing okay, but didn't have a lot of money. And I saw after Granddad died, I saw their years of donations to Billy. $15 a month to the Billy, who didn't need it. Billy Graham did not need it. So I guess they thought they were doing it for God and they were doing the right thing.
Would have been better to invest in their grandchildren.
Yeah, if they put that money in the bank over those years.
Or did something that improved the world, but.
Yeah.
So they were victims.
But they were good people. They had good motives. They wanted to do the right thing. And when you come out as an atheist from that family community, it almost feels like you are dissing them as people when you're not. And they probably feel that same way, like, well, why are you saying we're bad? We're not saying they're bad. We're saying the ideas are bad.
Well, and then I think that shows the harm of religion. It's highly divisive. It can break apart families. It can lead to shunning people who should enjoy each other, who can't have a conversation. So another reason why we like to imagine no religion at the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And do we have any questions?
We do. We have a question from Amy. Amy asks, do you think you can be both an atheist and an agnostic? A little of both. Can you think there is no God, but also say you can't know for certain? We talk about this all the time.
We do, yeah. It's kind of like asking, can you be an American and a Democrat? They're two different things. You can be both. And it's because, as we talked about on an earlier show, atheism/theism are addressing the question of what do you believe. But agnosticism/Gnosticism are addressing the question of what do you know. And so they're totally different things. So you can be totally agnostic and say, I don't know, but also say, neither do I believe. So I think most agnostics, which I'm an agnostic, I think we're all agnostics when it comes to these things, most agnostics are atheistic agnostics, although there's a few agnostics who are theistic agnostics. You were talking about Pascal earlier. Mm-hmm. Pascal was this Roman Catholic believer who basically admitted he was an agnostic. We don't know if there's a God, I don't know, and we can't know, but you're better off believing. So you would call Pascal a theistic agnostic, and you could call me an atheistic agnostic.
But I would think Thomas Huxley, who came up and coined the term agnostic, probably would not have approved of Blaise Pascal.
No, but he would have acknowledged that you can be an agnostic and still hold a belief. Even though you don't have a knowledge, you could still claim that belief.
And I like to say, I don't care what you call yourself, whether you're a humanist or a skeptic or a rationalist or an atheist or an agnostic, we all just believe in the same gods.
Yeah. Yeah. Although, I would say that if you define God in a certain way, carefully enough, we could say as atheists, well, I actually know that particular God doesn't exist. I don't necessarily...
Well, the God of the Bible.
Yeah, like the God of the Bible. It'd be like arguing for the existence of a married bachelor. Well, it's mutually contradictory. So that particular God, like an omniscient God who's also omnipotent, cannot actually exist logically. But that doesn't rule out all other possible millions of definitions of a God.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm pretty much all those things you said. I'm an atheist, a humanist, an agnostic, a free thinker, but I just choose to call myself an atheist for fun. That's an important one too. We have another question from Kim Countryman. I've seen a celebrity interview where this person said that they walk away immediately upon finding out that someone is an atheist, and they refuse to speak to them. How do you address people who refuse to talk to you on any level based solely on your non-belief?
Well, pretty hard to address them if they walk away from you. I think that just shows the bigotry of religion, that they've spent too many hours in the pew being preached at and hearing Bible verses like Psalms, 14,
yeah.
That the fool has said in his heart that there's a God and
there's no God, yeah.
There's no atheist who's ever done anything good.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's obvious. Somebody has been heavily indoctrinated, and they put their dogma above people, and that's the harm of religion again.
I think there's also a little bit of an admission in refusing to even engage. You know, it's your ideas about the world, your religion can't withstand any type of new input or criticism or questioning or even a conversation. You know, it's almost admitting the weakness of their belief system.
Yeah.
I want to know who that celebrity is.
Yeah, maybe Kim will share a little more information on Facebook, and we can look at that more closely. But that's all the questions that we have for today.
Well, we had a lot of questions,
Yeah.
and it was really fun to see the questions from the farmers market. Very intelligent crowd.
Are there more questions like that from the farmers?
I think we have one more show.
We could show them on a later Facebook
right.
Live.
Absolutely.
Well, so that's our show for today. Thanks for watching, and thanks for submitting your questions. I'm Dan Barker with Annie Laurie Gaylor and Andrew Seidel. And do we have a topic for next week?
No, not yet.
Not yet. So we're going to have another Ask an Atheist next week at 12 noon Central Time. And if you like what we're doing, if you want to get involved, you can become a member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. You can join us. Go to ffrf.org, and you can either become a member or donate or support our legal work. So we'll see you again next week.